Welcome back, chess friends, to 1933, where we have a game between the theoretical physicists Albert Einstein and J. Robert Oppenheimer. Yes, about 1,000 other chess channels have already covered this game, but it's actually really great fun, so I'm going to do it anyway. I suppose we all thought that one way or another. So Einstein opens with e4, we have e5, knight to f3, and Oppenheimer has a ponder, trying to figure out whether Einstein actually knows any theory, and he plays knight to c6. Einstein says, yes, it's about time, and he plays the Roy Lopez. Oppenheimer goes for the Roy Lopez Morphy defense, and he's standing on the shoulders of giants, of course. The bishop retreats, and he continues with Roy Lopez Morphy defense Caro variation, causing the bishop to retreat once more. And now knight to f6, attacking the pawn in the center here, which is undefended, and he challenges Einstein. He declares, "Castle Einstein." And Einstein happily castles because he knows his theory. He says, if you were to capture this pawn, it would only enrich my development, so do it if you dare. And Oppenheimer does dare. This move is not great, but not terrible. Einstein moves his rook to e1, x-raying the king right up the center of the board, but as we know, Oppenheimer is very comfortable with x-rays, so he just ignores it and plays d5. Now, a good move for Einstein here would be knight to c3, challenging the central knight, but he decides to depart from established ideas and make his own way. He plays a4, but in actual fact his experiment has gone horribly wrong here. It actually blunders the entire game to Oppenheimer. A good move here for Oppenheimer would be bishop to c5, because it would likely trigger a chain reaction. He's focusing a double attack on this weak pawn here, and it will likely lead to an escalating expulsion of material. We'd have d4, and then the knight captures, and the knight captures, the bishop captures, the bishop blocks the double attack here again on the pawn, and we have mutually assured destruction of the bishops, and bishop to e6, knight to d2, and again mutually assured destruction of the knights. And after all the dust has settled, you'll see that white has only 6 pawns to black's 8, and so in this position black is much stronger, and we would expect him to carry on to win the game. However, Oppenheimer did not play bishop to c5. He went for a highly suspicious push on the left wing and failed to capitalize. He went b4. So the game continues with Einstein pushing d3, chasing away this knight. Knight back to f6 would maintain equilibrium, but instead Oppenheimer plays his horse to c5, which is much more unstable. He actually drops the pawn here, which Einstein immediately captures with the knight. Now, Oppenheimer doesn't want to capture back here because it will just lead to an uncomfortable check from the rook, so instead he goes for knight to e7, trying to calm things down before they get too out of control. But Einstein's just warming up. He plays queen to f6, and this is threatening a checkmate on the f7 square, and this because this square is covered, so Oppenheimer has to deal with this. A good way to deal with it would be to develop the bishop here, which defends the pawn here and the checkmate, but he doesn't do this. In actual fact, his next move won't be the first decision that he would live to regret, and it certainly won't be his last. He opens Pandora's box with f6, and with this he's just handed Einstein all the space and time here on the king's side. Queen to h5 with check, and now the king can't move, so you're going to have to block with something. Blocking with the knight's a very bad idea because it comes with this horrible check up the middle, and you're picking up the rook as well as the knight. So instead Oppenheimer goes for g6, the move recommended by the engine. But Einstein's calculations are relatively better, and he just captures the pawn with the knight. Now the knight can't capture back because it's pinned, so Oppenheimer captures with the pawn, and Einstein secures his castle. Oppenheimer continues with just capturing this bishop in the corner, captures back. Now Einstein is pinning the bishop against the king, so Oppenheimer really needs to deal with this. A good way of doing so would be king to f7, which adds the queen as a defender, but Oppenheimer doesn't do this. He really accelerates the collapse and goes for queen to d6. Einstein says, I'm going to end your whole career, and moves his bishop to h6. Oppenheimer retreats his king, and Einstein says, you're playing like a little boy, you've dropped your bishop here. Oppenheimer says, don't be such a critical ass, fat man, and he brings his bishop back here, pinning Einstein's bishop. But Einstein's unstoppable, and he moves his queen to g7, which now pins the knight here. Oppenheimer creates his own X-ray down the middle of the board, so Einstein needs to be careful, as one wrong move could mean the end of everything back home with a back rank checkmate. So he plays knight to d2 to take care of things, and Oppenheimer compounds matters with c5, because now rook on a to d1 focuses a tremendous amount of energy down the middle of the board, splitting it in two. There's not much left for Oppenheimer to do. He just plays a5, trying to stabilize matters. Now, the next move is relatively famous. When I hit the big red button, you'll have a 10-second countdown. See if you can find Einstein's most famous move and defeat the father of the atomic bomb. Let's go. Okay, time's up. If you formulated that E equals NC square 4 was the correct move, then at first glance it seems like a preposterous hypothesis, but of course you're right. A few people laughed, a few people cried, but most people were silent as they realized the queen is pinned. So we have an unequal exchange on d1, and this comes with a check on the black king now. A check on the black king. So the king has to step aside, and Einstein, not Oppenheimer, becomes Death, the destroyer of worlds. And this is too much for Oppenheimer to deal with. He finally melts down and resigns the game. Thanks for joining me for this great miniature. I appreciate it. I'll see you next time.